showed me why. Instead of asking why, start asking why not. Time flies when you're having fun. Time flies when you're lying in the sun. Bit by bit, the older that we get, the faster it tick, 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 ticks. Time flies. Whoa, whoa, time flies.
Good afternoon, Lyndall here again with Marshfield Old School Times. Happy to come to you today with from the George Ballard podcast room here at the Old School building with two former MHS graduates. First of all, we have over here on my left Shelby Leigh Atkison, the editor of the Marshfield Mail. Shelby, welcome.
Hello. Nice to be back.
You're a two-timer.
Yeah.
And you graduated what year?
2012.
2012. And on my right, I have my cousin and another MHS grad, 1989, Stacey Claire Pendergrass.
Yep.
Stacey, welcome.
Thank you.
So, just for the record, Stacey and I are two of 17 grandchildren of Cale and Josie Roast, and Stacey's the youngest.
I am.
Linda Roast Dickinson is the eldest, and so all the rest of us are in between. So, wonderful family, blessed to come from two great families, and you've heard me say that on this podcast before, but it's really true. But we're here today on a serious note. We're going to talk about domestic abuse. And there's probably, right now at least, in Marshfield, Missouri, probably not two more people that know more about that first and secondhand, you might say, with Stacey, but firsthand with Shelby. And so I prayed about this and thought about this, and I think there's an awful lot of rumors, innuendos, gossip, all kinds of stuff going on out there in social media about what's been going on here in Marshfield. And because Haley Pendergrass Rowe is Stacey's daughter, what we call second cousins, or first cousin once removed, if you want to be technical, it's important to all of us in the family to make sure that Haley's story is told correctly. And the thing that we want to do is tell the truth. We want the truth to come forward. It's always got to be about the truth. Shelby has as much information and is as good as a reporter as there is on this topic because she has lived domestic violence. And we're going to kind of start today with Shelby talking a little bit about the topic, a little bit about her history with that, and then we may move a little more into the specific case with Haley. But Shelby, this is still kind of fresh on your mind, and I know that's one reason you have such a passion to help people when they become victims, because you've lived it and you understand it. And tell me where you're at in your particular situation. Your case is still fairly fresh. Why don't you bring us up to date a little bit, and then kind of tell us where you are with that.
So, I do get a little passionate about this for a couple reasons. Right now, I think that I'm working a lot on still healing. I don't think that that's something that comes in a short amount of time by any means. And I talk to so many women who have experienced these same emotions, and some of them are in their 70s and 80s and are telling me about things that traumatic life events that happened when they were young girls in their 20s that have stuck with them for 6 decades. So that is why I think it's important. Whenever women have gone through this for the entirety of our world history, people are ashamed. We are built to believe that we should be ashamed of the crimes that have been committed against us whenever you're a victim of domestic abuse. So, for one, if I would have seen, it's not something that whenever I was in that relationship, I never had seen a woman that I knew personally or locally who was publicly reminding women of what happened. So I decided to become that. Now, for the first 6 or 7 months after I was kidnapped, and I could have died. I had my life threatened while I was kidnapped, and I believed that I would die. And I was very blessed, and God protected me and heard my prayers, and I was able to get out of that. And I drove myself straight to Sheriff Cole's office and ran inside. And I got a restraining order that day. I went to Safe Harbor, which is right up here off of the square, and the ladies there helped me. Mind you, I'd just been kidnapped and raped, and the week before that, I had been beaten so badly the night of Thanksgiving that the next morning early I had a miscarriage. I was locked in my bathroom for the next day or two. And it was 4 or 5 days after that I finally escaped. Whenever I went to Safe Harbor, I did not feel like I had any thoughts in my mind except for what I'd had ingrained in me, which was, if you speak up, I'm going to kill your father. I'm going to kill your brother. I'm going to kill the sheriff. I'm going to kill everyone of power that you know and everyone that you love. And whenever your life is threatened and you've had your foot broken and your face busted up to where you're unrecognizable compared to before, and when you've had all these things happen, you truly believe those threats. So that being said, I was in no shape to advocate for myself. And through Safe Harbor, I was able to go to therapy twice a week. And I'm not sure if this is normal, but I will share this as well. I was able to be through Safe Harbor. They offer help with that. Therapy is very expensive whenever your insurance does not cover it. And whenever you're a victim of abuse like this, it's really important to work through that trauma, because you cannot advocate for yourself until you realize what happened to you. I didn't realize that I almost died until I finally, it was 6 or 7 months after I'd already been in the court process. And at that point in time, I decided, if everyone else can talk about this, I can talk about this, and I can advocate for myself. This is my story too, because it happened to me.
Shelby, let me stop you for a minute.
Yeah.
There's a lot there to unwrap. First of all, I'm sorry that happened to you. I had no idea that your situation had gotten that dire when you came to Safe Harbor, and I just never heard your story. And that's why we're doing this today, because these are traumatic experiences. You were raised in a great home with a great family, with great extended family, and probably hadn't even seen or experienced this kind of thing at all.
Never. And
so it would be one thing it'd be just as traumatic if you grew up in an environment like that, but you didn't. And I would say Haley would be in the same boat. She grew up in a wonderful, loving home, great parents, great extended family. And we're talking about people right here in Marshfield, Missouri, families in Marshfield, Missouri. And then you become of age and you start your own lives, and then for whatever reasons, a bad person comes into your life, and then something this traumatic happens. I can't imagine how that would mark a person and how you could ever recover from that. So God bless you in that regard. But I think it's good for people to understand, we're not talking about abuse that's been in your life the whole time. It's a brand new traumatic experience.
And it's something that, you truly do not understand it until you've been through it. That's why I say, with all of the people who have experienced this, 1 in 5 women will experience physical domestic violence. 1 in 5. 1 in 5. Do you remember the last 5 women you spoke to? That is an insane statistic.
It's just incomprehensible. It truly
so,
is.
And I feel like an oddity because I have no children. Children are in the home experiencing this abuse, and if they're not firsthand seeing it, they're hearing it. And if they're not hearing it, they're seeing the aftermath. They're feeling the tension, the the worst part of everything that happened to me was not staples in my head. I have a huge scar. That's why my hair does not part directly in the middle, because there is a wide scar on my head that will never go away. That's about this wide, and I had 13 staples. So that's not even the worst part. The broken foot wasn't the worst part. There was one instance where Eric Waters is the name of my abuser. He had a son that I love that child dearly, and when there are children involved, it makes it that much harder because a part of you feels like you're protecting that child. But there was a time right after the first time he abused me. The second time was around the time, it was right before we went to Disneyland, and we lived in Springfield. The child's mother had dropped him off with us because she was going to a wedding in St. Louis with some of her college friends, and so we had his son there, and he choked me unconscious, and his son was peeking around the corner and saw that happen, and that's the last thing I saw was his son's face before I went unconscious. That is something that will never be erased from my mind. So the children that are experiencing this, it's heartbreaking, and when you feel like you're protecting that child, it's very hard to leave. Another thing, I used to be one of the people who would say, why would she put herself in that situation? Why would she stay once he did it? Why would she stay once he did it 5 times? You stay because it is not something that you just say, hey, I'm Shelby, we're in a relationship now, and then the abuse starts in a week. It starts, I knew my abuser since I was 18 years old, but the abuse starts mentally. It starts by
kind of
controlling,
in a lighter form initially,
and then everything
builds.
snowballs. The emotional and financial abuse, the physical abuse, they all incite the same reactions. You are tensed up 24/7. You never know what situation you're going to walk into when you come home. You're walking on eggshells. The physical violence is the last part that starts. Once that physical violence starts, it only gets worse. Once a man strangles you, you are 90% more likely to die at the hands of that man. Strangulation is so dangerous. Yeah. And reading
and that's choking, and that's happened to Haley, right?
Yeah, so I have looked it up, and strangulation, it's 10 seconds. It can be 10 seconds when they actually pass out. They become unconscious. They lose consciousness. At about 4 minutes, it can do brain damage. It could even be more than that if it gets the artery, then just cutting off the air supply. So there's many times that people almost lose their lives if they're strangled.
Well, what I don't understand, and I've seen the video with Haley, but what occurs in someone's brain or mind to provoke them such that they would, if she's over here doing something at the cabinet and they're on the couch and they're relaxed or whatever, and all of a sudden, just out of the blue, they jump up and they go over and they grab her and they throw her down and start to choke. What
Anger.
In the world could? Well, yeah. And that's the whole point.
Evil.
They don't. Yeah. They don't control themselves at that moment. It's beyond.
Oh yes, they do. Though.
Well, maybe they do.
Have absolute control because they don't lose control in front of anyone. Yeah. They do it like that because it's a condition. That wasn't the first time that happened to her.
No. Oh no. It happened 3 times
but,
that morning.
But what I was going to say was, though, if whatever happens, control or not control, that they can do that, then there's nothing to say that the next time that they couldn't squeeze a little harder or they couldn't do something that would kill her. I mean, there's no line there. How do you say, well, they didn't kill her? Well, no, it didn't, but it could the next time, right?
I believe there was he was attempting to kill her. He was attempting to silence her. Haley's, if you watch it, I've watched it since March. She would take her hand and push him. Well, then he would take his knee and put it on her arm, and then you can see him fighting for that. Well, once he got her in that position, and she actually takes her legs and lock it, he took his hand and he was suffocating her. He had her nose and her mouth covered enough that she bled. Her inside her mouth bled, her nose and her mouth bled. He was trying to get her not to talk and not to breathe. But she was moving just enough to protect the baby that was there. She couldn't do more than she could have used her legs more, but she was afraid of hurting her. And her using her arms, that saved her life.
Yeah.
God protected her many times. He
Sure.
had a gun in his hand that day
Yeah.
in the bedroom. And
Oh,
God
really?
protected her. Yeah, the chances of him having a gun.
Yeah.
He left that day with a gun on his side.
And this is your baby girl.
And this is my girl. And
And-
I was like, when she was,
Yeah.
newborn, 3 years old,
Right.
would I ever have thought this would have happened?
Right.
No.
Right.
But she's still here.
That's right. That's
And
right.
you're still standing,
And that's
Shelby.
why we're here today.
Fighting.
We're here for the truth. We're here to raise awareness of what can go on, what is
Yes.
going on out there in Marshfield, Missouri, Webster County, Missouri, wherever. And that's why we're here. We're not here to place blame on a judge or on a prosecutor. That's not what we're here for. We're here to look at the system and say there's something wrong with the system
And society.
in society in general, and it's got to be fixed. There's got to be protection for these people somehow. And carry on, Shelby. I didn't want to pull you from your story, but
You're fine.
Carry on with your next thoughts on it.
Well, I did want to add on really quickly with strangulation. I think that their goal, you cannot rationalize the mind of someone who would commit these acts, because it's not something that you or I
Understand.
would ever do to someone else in any circumstance. The reason that I want to touch on this, the reason that I say they do not ever lose control is because actually my cousin is one of Haley's neighbors, and he's a pretty big old boy and a pretty respected old boy.
Yes.
And it was a calculated and controlled move for Jordan to never lose control in front of the neighbors.
Oh, yeah.
Never lose
Oh,
control in front of the family.
Yeah.
Do you think that Jordan let any of those children experience or witness this abuse and tell them, and not, I'm sure he said something to them along the lines of, you don't tell anyone about what happens here.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's something that
Yeah.
my abuser told
That's
his
bullying.
son.
That's what a bully does.
And then you're affecting the mind of a child, and you are telling them that what happens in your household stays in your household. That just furthers the cycle of abuse.
Oh, yeah.
Because God forbid a child grow up to commit the same heinous acts as their parent. When it comes to things like this, children, thank God there are more resources and there's more of an understanding of why children need to be in therapy when they experience these things.
Oh, yeah.
That aside, I also wanted to touch on strangulation. I believe that is intent to murder. It is really hard. You have to look at all of this as look at it as a chess game. You have to look at every single piece, every potential move, and strategize. And the thing with domestic violence and the court system is you have to be able to, without a doubt, prove by Missouri statutes of what a charge is, did this person commit this without a doubt? Without a doubt. So how do you prove that strangulation is attempted murder? You can't unless they vocalize it and it's recorded, and whoever, thank God he was stupid enough to put up ring cameras in his own
We have a
house to
video.
record his own
Yes.
abuse.
Yep.
Because I'll tell you why he did that. I know that he did that because he was controlling every moment of what Haley did. He wanted to know every moment of her day because I've lived it. But this abuse, there is no reason that when there is video evidence, it needs to be taken care of. But it's impossible to prove attempted murder in domestic violence when someone's strangled. But that is what it is. They do commit the act of strangling someone with the intent to kill them. I was strangled. I can't tell you how many times because I was unconscious that many times. I was strangled when he tackled me in the yard the day that he kidnapped me. As I was calling 911, I was strangled unconscious then. I woke up as he was dragging me up through our door. He strangled me unconscious once we got inside. That's the second time. I woke up 2 or 3 more times to be strangled immediately again. It's like they get off on it.
No.
I'm not kidding you. It's a demented and sick and twisted thing.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no rationalizing it. I had to really work in therapy to understand that, because I'm an empathetic person, and I try to understand even where I don't have enemies, but even where my enemies would be coming from, even someone I cannot understand why they would do it, I want to understand. I want to understand so that I can empathize with what would have caused them to do this. However, you have to realize that you cannot rationalize erratic behavior, and that is what domestic violence is. It doesn't matter if it's a woman hitting a man or a man hitting a woman. It is erratic, and it's not able to be rationalized. So once you realize that, you start to realize, okay, this isn't going to be a cut and dry, I know what he did to me and it was wrong and he deserves prison. It's not that simple. You have to strategize, you have to prove it. And I never planned on going to the police. I never wanted to be embarrassed this way. Thank God I was, because Haley's not the first or the 10th or the 20th woman I've helped since this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I don't ever shut up about it.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, thank you for what you do for victims and what you've done for Haley, because I know you've really done a lot to lead the charge in bringing awareness, if nothing else, to this terrible, traumatic topic that we're talking about. I wanted to touch a couple things. So, of course, Haley's married. She was married to this guy and still is, actually. The divorce is not finalized. And you hear people say, like you mentioned too, gosh, why didn't she leave him, and why did she keep the kids there? What, blah, blah, blah. Well, Stacey, you understand this, because we came from families where when you say those marriage vows, it's sickness and health.
Yeah.
It's love and cherish. It's he should cherish her just like Jesus cherishes us, right?
Exactly.
And it's not something, you don't throw a marriage away immediately. And I'm sure that Haley, as you said, it was a gradual thing. Maybe it took a while before he got physical. I don't know, but it's something that we can't just say. Vows mean something, and till death do part means something when you're making a vow to the Lord. And I just think that's something that we forget about sometimes. The other thing that I wanted to mention is Haley's testimony in court was remarkable. It was on Facebook. Many of you have probably read it. She did a wonderful job. I can't imagine that not being extremely impactful to a judge or a prosecutor or whoever was in that courtroom. It certainly was to me, just reading it on Facebook. But the one thing that she mentioned that was so I guess humble or loving, whatever. She said, "I'm not here for bitterness. I'm here for safety. I just want to feel safe."
Yeah.
And it's easy for us to sit around and talk about a case, and I'm going to go home and we're going to, have Christmas and we're going to do all this. But she's got to live with that the rest of her life.
Yeah.
The rest of her life. And is it really asking too much, or would it be asking too much to just give her some safety for a short period of time by putting him in prison?
Yep.
Is that really asking that much?
Nope, not at all.
Because I've heard all kinds of reasons. Well, if we'd sent him on to prison, then he wouldn't have as much probation, and we wouldn't. I don't really know about any of that. And again, I'm not here to judge, but it seems like for her own peace of mind to have a year, a couple of years, a few months of knowing that he's in prison and she can try to get her life back
Yes,
together.
yeah.
The other thing that I want to say about Haley, through all of this, she's pursued her
Yes.
career goals
Yes.
of the next level of a nursing degree.
Yes.
She's a registered nurse
Yeah.
and did all this.
Yeah.
When all this was going on, I'd be locking myself in a room going, what in the world, man? Just to try to stay alive,
Yeah.
And that's pretty remarkable. And then still having to raise children by herself now
Yes. Oh,
with
yeah.
the help of her mother. But I mean, she's a remarkable young woman, and we should all get behind and support Haley and what she's had to go through, and that's why we're doing this. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of the truth on this whole situation.
If someone is a domestic abuser, you're likely not their first victim, and you won't be the last. It's a pattern, and they only get better and better every time they do it. They have a plan. Every one of them has a plan every time they enter a relationship to obtain control and then to execute their plan. And it's insane, but it is a cycle. People say it's a cycle because you don't even realize it until you're in it. And that's something that I really want people to understand if they understand nothing else. You can't understand it until you've experienced it. Even if someone in your family has experienced it, you can't understand what it is like. And I'm so thankful that most people don't understand that pain. But it's worse in isolation, and the biggest tool that an abuser uses is isolating them. And people still saw me every day with a smile on my face doing my job by myself, covering all of Webster County.
Absolutely.
There's no way people would, and I think that's why people are so quick to say, well, she's a liar, that didn't happen, there's no way, that's crazy. Yeah. And I also think that it shocks people when they see something like that video that got over 8 million views. But that's really nothing. And that sounds like a rude thing to say, but that's nothing compared to everything else that they experienced that day. That's just the part that she was able to get. Yes. And thank God she was. Mm-hmm. But it's really the parts of evidence that you might happen to find, it's nothing compared to the things that were so violent and caught you so off guard that I laid in a bathtub and was locked in a bathroom bleeding out. He poured stop bleed powder in my head. He would have let me die in that bathroom before he took me to a hospital. And then when I did finally a week later or something make it to a hospital, I had to have that stop bleed powder raked out of my head so that they could get all of those. It's like sand. They had to rake it all out of my head, and it's busted open 2 inches wide, 3 inches wide. And then they had to staple it together because I never just went and got it stitched or went and got it looked like. But thank God it was just my skin that busted open, because he would have just let me bleed out and die in that bathroom. They do these insane things, and then the cycle is able to happen because they'll pick you up and put you in the bathtub and clean your wounds, and you're so in shock that when they're saying, here, I'll help you, I'm gonna help you, they're helping you. They train you to believe that they're the only ones that can protect you whenever they're the only ones hurting you, yeah. But you don't, and it sounds stupid. Like, I'm not a stupid girl. No. I am not a stupid girl. I did very well in school. I might be a little naive on the street smart stuff here and there, but once I learn, I learn quickly. But I'm not a stupid girl. It just, you don't know until it happens to you. And I think that in order to recognize those signs without having been through it, it has to be a conversation. And it doesn't have to be a hateful conversation. It can be an open conversation of, none of us are Jesus and not one of us is perfect. How can we as a community help decrease how often this happens here, increase how often victims feel safe enough to seek justice for themselves.
Exactly.
The other thing I want people to understand is if you are a victim of domestic violence, if you have been in the past, I applaud you for your strength if you went through that. It is not an easy task. If you are just entering that right now, the number one thing I need you to understand is no one can advocate for you the way that you can advocate for yourself. And something I'll tell you about the criminal justice system is they're not super used, because of how society is, they're not super used to victims finding the strength in the time that a court process happens to actually advocate for themselves. So it's very easy to just trust the system. I trusted the system for 6-7 months before I finally started asking questions. And when I did and I never got the answers, or I got told, something that my assigned victims advocate said to me, and I quote, there's several things that stick with me to this day. But one of those things was whenever I was calling a couple times a week, texting, calling, saying, hey, I saw him at this place in Springfield and I didn't get out of the car because I saw him walk out of the building and I peed my pants. Because a trauma response is physical. It's not up to you to control. It is physical. It's the vibration shakes. It's wetting your pants, and that sounds ridiculous. I peed my pants over 30 times in the last 3 years. I'll tell you the truth. It doesn't go away. It is a extreme, and that sound like everybody's like, oh, Shelby pees her pants. No. Every person who's got complex PTSD has peed their pants. I promise you. And so that you have to fight for yourself. You have to advocate for yourself. If someone tells you, this is the quote, it's just all in your head, but never does the due diligence to even check for one single GPS monitor report, because they never requested a single GPS report. Never one time did they request a report in the 20-30 times that I reported that he is not following his bond conditions. Mind you, I was so scared before he was put in jail with no bond. I started carrying a shotgun around, and I would carry a shotgun in my truck, and I would carry a shotgun into the Marshfield mail office and have it under my desk every day, because I was so scared. And that fear doesn't go away just because someone is put on a GPS monitor. And I can tell you right now that unless you see the report yourself, do not believe that anyone has checked it, because I've experienced over a year of my life where I was told it's all in your head. There's no violations. Well, how do you know? You never even checked. Do you think that I'm full of crap? What's crazy is one of the places you have to use your ID at the place he was going to that wasn't on his bond conditions, and there's video cameras everywhere. So in the course of I think they did a 3-week period, the bond revocation hearing in Polk County, once I was moved to a new prosecutor, it was over 4 hours long. There were people from Jefferson City who came down to hear it, because this is not something that is just a problem in Webster County, Polk County. This is something that is a problem statewide. Something that people might not understand is whenever a defendant is placed on house arrest and has a GPS monitor, the GPS monitor is monitored by some company. It is not a government office. It's not a court service. It is it's like a private, think of it as a private business. And so let's call Bob the GPS monitoring provider. Why would Bob run a report and violate someone who's paying him $175 a week? If they're paying me $800 a month to have a GPS monitor on their ankle, why would I give up that income? I don't work for the courts.
Right.
I'm not sworn to do anything ethically. So no, there is no safe safety in place even when they are on house arrest. A piece of paper and a protection order does nothing as well. Another question I have, and sorry I get so fired up, but
you're fine.
another question that I have is, I had to fight to get a restraining order, but I got my restraining order the first time that day. And do you know, he broke my phone, so it's not like I had any evidence, but I had my story. I had a report filed with the police. There was going to be action taken. And the judge in Webster County, this was my positive experience. The judge in Webster County awarded me a 40-year restraining order. I get confused here. It was either 40 years or 80 years, but you'll see why I get that confused, because it's the longest restraining order that's ever been given in Webster County court history. And this happened at a time where Missouri state law had just changed, so they judges are able to put like some kind of like a clause into the restraining orders to say once this expires, it automatically renews. You don't have to reapply for this restraining order. So for the 80 years or whatever that I'm protected by this, basically until we are both dead, I don't have to reapply for that restraining order. Now, I say that because that's my experience in Webster County. However, I talk to thousands of people a month, not exaggerating. And anyone who talks to me about domestic violence or pursuing a restraining order, Haley tried to get a restraining order with that video that we all saw last year when it happened, and she was denied, not only for herself, but for her nonverbal child who relies on her for protection. She's legally blind. She can't even see to be able to protect herself. She can't communicate. She was denied a restraining order? She was denied. But then the day of sentencing, I told her, like,
which was just like 2 weeks ago? She
Yeah.
didn't get one till 2 weeks ago?
No.
She had one through the courts a
Well,
little bit.
through the bond.
Yeah, bond.
Bond conditions. Yeah. But then once sentencing's over, those bond conditions go away, and there's minor things to protect you, but not to the extent of a protection order.
Yes.
And a protection order is just a piece of paper.
Right.
I'm still carrying around a shotgun. You know what I mean?
Still can't come in the back door or beat the door in or whatever.
Yeah. So she gets they were able to pass an emergency protective order for Haley. Her children, there will be a hearing January 5th, I believe, for the children's protective order. And I'm confident that will go through. But here, I say all of this to say, protection orders are just a piece of paper. In many counties in Missouri, you can apply for a protection order online, an ex parte online. And most of the places, they grant like 90% of them. So why is it so hard to get a protection order here? It's just a piece of paper. Yeah. And even if you say, okay, we're gonna push this through, go ahead and subpoena the person that you're trying to get an ex parte against. Most of the time, they don't even show up to court. It has nothing to do with anything, and it doesn't provide any protection anyway. But what it does do is it's a paper trail and a record of a woman saying, this has happened to me, and it's, you have to have those things. The sooner you can get them, the better, because eventually, if you wait until the 10th time that something crazy happens, or if 5 women never pursued anything against a man and you're his 6th victim, sorry, he's still getting a slap on the wrist. So you have to have those paper trails. And why is it so hard to get one passed in Webster County? I would love for an open dialogue on that subject, because why am I hearing about so many women and children and men who apply for protective orders and they are failed? Yeah. How is that happening? It's just a piece of paper. So why, if there is any substantiality to it, why are we not giving it to especially if there's
video.
court proceedings
Right.
in the process. They shouldn't be in contact anyway. So why aren't you just approving the
Yes.
restraining order? That just makes a victim feel more powerless.
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
So that's
Not
my
heard.
biggest grievance with the way that her restraining order should have been passed for her children as well.
Oh,
Haley
yeah.
has a 14-year-old daughter as well, and a younger son, and those children shouldn't be subjected to that either. I would want a protective order for all of my children.
Yes.
I wouldn't want a single shred of possibility that I haven't covered my basis. But when a woman tries to do that and it's shut down that early, no wonder it took her 6 months to finally like
Oh, yeah.
open up about it, you
Oh,
know?
Yeah.
No wonder it took me 6 months, but I got the restraining order. How does it feel when you're diminished on day one
Oh, yeah. With
Wow.
a video.
with a video?
With a video. That's what got me.
I wanted to ask you this, and Stacey, this might be for you on this particular, on Haley's case, but the police responded, the way I understand, promptly,
Yes.
and in what I've heard and read is did their job
Yes.
and did it well as could be expected.
Yes.
I know, Shelby, you did a story in last week's Marshfield Mail, which was a very well written story, and I was kind of surprised to see that Chief Fannin was very clear in your story, in your article, in your interview, that he's frustrated with the system as well. And I've always been a big proponent for backing the blue. When I was in the state legislature, I sponsored legislation to help get the sheriff and the deputies more money because those guidelines were set in statute, and that some counties didn't have to pay over a certain amount, and we got those limits raised. But backing the blue is very important, and I was glad to hear in your case, at least,
Yes,
and maybe yours too, that the burden here was not on the police department. And of course, we all know Sheriff Coe really well, and I know he's been working really hard the last few years on this truth in sentencing
Yeah.
issue, which is a huge thing that most people don't understand, that don't even know about. But the police work hard to get people arrested.
They do the investigation
Yeah.
to give to a prosecutor's office so that the justice process can start, so the court process can start. However, truth in sentencing, I'll put it in a nutshell for you because I've written a couple articles. If you'd like to Google truth in sentencing Marshfield Mail, you can find some old articles from previous years where he was still working on it. Truth in sentencing basically is just think of it as the end of the line for every case. On sentencing day, no one, victim, defendant, criminal attorney, prosecuting attorney, judge, court reporter, random person waiting for the next docket, no one in that courtroom leaves from that court date without knowing a release date. Exact amount of time and a release date.
Yeah. And so the probation and parole board,
It's transparency.
it's transparency, and it sort of strips some of the decision that the board makes based on testimony of whoever down the road years from now. In other words, it tightens up so everybody knows from the beginning what that sentence is going to be. And this, getting a 5-year sentence, but they can get out on parole in a year or whatever, it eliminates that. And that's something that we need in Missouri. And I think there's several states that have it. Missouri does not. It's really important, but they can't get that through because of money.
They're getting closer and closer every year,
yeah.
and it's been over 10 years. So
Yeah.
I'm really hopeful that in the next few years, I think that the louder we are about this topic, any violent case, whatever, but domestic violence, whenever someone does not have the ability to protect themselves, the community should step up and protect them. If there are children that are hurting or in danger, the community needs to make sure that they are protected. There are just things that you have to be loud about whenever it's in your community. You cannot pick a side, and you can't stay idle, and you can't just sit back and say, well, this doesn't concern me, because someday it could concern you. And are you doing anything now to make it better for future victims?
Right.
I don't care if domestic violence has never touched you or your family. It's never touched me either. And it destroyed my life. Destroyed it. Personally. I know that that's a shock. This is a shock for a lot of people in the community, to hear the things that I've went through that aren't like, that don't know me well. And I do want to say that you never know what the person next to you is going through, because they're never going to tell you the worst things that are happening in their life, ever.
A lot of courage.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of courage.
So you have to just consider that a woman in your family, a man in your family could be experiencing this right now. And what you do or do not say is going to affect when and how they come forward, or if they decide to. Everything that you say and that you do affects the future victims. And unfortunately, there are not enough good people on the right side of history who are willing to take a stand until it's already easy to do so. Other people have started doing this, and it's the popular thing to do, so let's hop on board. You can't wait until it's a convenient time to make it a point. And the more that we do this, the more legislators are going to see and prioritize something like truth in sentencing, because that will not only help victims of domestic violence, but victims of murder, of any violent crime, of any crime at all, of anything, of if you're sentenced for your 20th DWI and you have to serve jail time or prison time or something, you're going to get the same transparency. It'll help everyone, but it's important for the ones who are the most at risk for being harmed.
Yeah. Well, I can assure you our legislators are aware of Haley's case, because I've made sure of that.
Thank you for that.
Where's your abuser now?
He's in Boonville, in the Department of Corrections. He was sentenced to 34 years for 7 felonies, for kidnapping and domestic assault and harassment, stalking. I don't remember if they dropped the stalk. It was charged and dismissed 3 or 4 different times, but what he pled guilty to was 7 felonies for kidnapping, domestic assault, and he was sentenced to 34 years. He only has to serve 7 of them, and 85% of that 7 years. So it's been 1 year since sentencing. I maybe have 3 more years of him being in prison, and then I'll have supposedly parole people will call me if he's eligible at that 85%, and I'll have the opportunity to speak. But that's another thing I want to make sure anyone who's went through this system and their abuser might be in prison, you have to make sure that you're contacting the prosecutor's office that worked in your case, and make sure that the Department of Corrections has all of your contact information. And I've already checked in twice. He's only been sentenced for a year, but I want to make sure that there's not a chance, because he's never lied to me. He's done everything he said he would do to me except for kill me, because I got away. I'm not convinced that the day he gets out of prison, he's not going to be ready to...
You live with that fear now.
It's everyone does. Everyone's experience. Yeah. So I will be speaking. You have to continue to advocate yourself for yourself forever. And like, God forbid that they do get a hold of you and you die and then you never got to tell your story.
Right.
Your case was in Polk County originally, or was...
No, it was in Webster County.
It was in Webster?
For 2 years, and then a special prosecutor was assigned. I do want to also say, my brother works in law enforcement, and I work for the newspaper, so I work with a lot of the law enforcement here. Mm-hmm. For my case, it took 3 weeks after I filed a report for anyone to start investigating, because Marshfield Police couldn't do it, Webster County can't do it, and
why was that?
They couldn't be biased in the investigation. They couldn't. They couldn't.
Okay.
I have actual blood family in one and people who are like family in the other, and they couldn't do it. So Missouri State Highway Patrol I also know a lot of troopers,
Mm-hmm.
and they sent someone from the St. Louis troop down to investigate, and then charges were filed and dismissed. Originally, I think he only faced 4 years with the original charges. They were dismissed and refiled the week before trial. I had already went through 4 or 5 hours of a deposition with his criminal defense attorney, asking me, how do I know I had a miscarriage? Because I was locked in the bathroom and had watched him flush my baby down the toilet. That's how I know. So I already went through the deposition, and I'm so ready for trial. It's 1 week, and it gets dismissed, and we have to start all over again. And that sounds like, oh, no, not a big deal. They have to change judges. Judges have to recuse themselves if they are unable to be impartial.
And you were working and writing stories for the paper and happy stories and all that during this whole time, and nobody really knew what you were going through.
So the prosecutor, I got a special prosecuting attorney. I went to Keaton Ashlock in Polk County, and Charity was my victim's advocate from there. And after they reviewed the case, they called me and asked me to come to their office, and I drove to Bolivar and I sat there with them, with the prosecuting attorney and a victim advocate and the assistant PA, which is a woman, and she was on fire. I wish I remember her name because she was amazing. But they sat there and they apologized to me for how this case has been handled. And they said that they didn't get to my case sooner when they took it on because they didn't realize the severity of what happened to me, because the way it was charged, it seems like I'd just been pushed around or locked in a closet or something. It didn't scream. She almost died. It wasn't charged to the extent of the crime. And there was 30 some files of evidence. When I say files of evidence, one file includes all of your media packages. So all of the pictures and videos is one piece of evidence. There was 38 pieces of evidence. And they were going to go hard for me. And they told me their plan, and they did that. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, I testified to a grand jury, and they were going to amend the charges from 7 felonies that was max 7 years, was the highest he was facing with those 7 felonies. I testified to a grand jury, whatever, and then they were going to amend the charges to 11 felonies, including many Class A felonies, and he would have been facing over twice the amount of time. None of that happened until I had already been in the court process for 3 years. And then more stuff happened, and election time rolls around, and there's going to be more judge changes, and more judges are going to have to recuse themselves, and I'm going to have to start all the way over. And where does this end up? Where does this end up? I had to get sentencing finished before Hendrickson retired at the time. And so luckily there was no plea deal. He paid for an attorney for over 3 years and then pled guilty to the 7 felonies that he was charged with. That there was no drop in it. He just pled guilty to as it was so that it didn't get bumped up and he was facing twice the amount of time. Oh, yeah. And I felt like I was giving up. Even though I fought so hard for so long, I felt like I was giving up. And it should be a victory. I know it should be a victory, and it's more of a victory than most people ever get, but it's still not enough.
And that's sad. That's really sad. Where's Mr. Rowe at today?
I believe he's living here in town. I think he works in Springfield. He still sees his 3 daughters from his first wife.
Do they live with the first wife?
They do. They had joint custody, but I'm not sure how that's going. We haven't seen them for several months. So
has he seen the little girl?
No, he has had no contact with her since March, and there's not been any asking or.
Is he communicated with Haley?
No, he's not allowed to except through the parent portal.
Good.
And he hasn't done that. So.
Good.
Yeah.
And hasn't attempted to try to come to the house or anything.
So no, he actually cannot. I think it's maybe 500 or
1,000
and then
feet,
it was
maybe.
1,000. So yeah. So
is Haley How's she doing?
She's doing okay. She's
All
moving
the
forward.
support, all the
The
support,
support
that the
has
community's
put a
shown.
wave of energy
Yeah,
from what
yes.
I've
It's helped.
seen.
Yeah.
Good. That
Because
was-
he had beaten her down where she didn't think even her
Yeah.
parents cared. She didn't think her close friends and isolated her and
She didn't think her parents. That's you.
yeah, oh yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't think
Yeah,
my
I was-
parents cared
yeah,
either at the
yeah.
time.
Really?
It's
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's
the
it's just
manipulation.
insane what they can do. And I'm a
Isolation.
strong-minded woman. Haley's a strong-minded woman.
Yeah.
We are both very educated women. It's not something that happens in even 1 year. This
Yeah.
builds up and builds up until it
Plays
is
with your
truly
mind.
too late to realize it.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Do
yeah.
you think, in both your cases, do you think they both have severe mental illness, or do you think or is it just they're just that way, and it's not that they know fully what they're doing, or do you think it's just they were
It's
born with some kind of a screw loose?
I think it's a little wall.
Yeah.
I'll
I
tell
think it's
you,
just
I
evil
don't
and
know
mean.
Jordan's parents, but I know that both his mother and father have contacted me, my boss, and somehow the owner of the company, trying to get me fired and threatening
Really?
lawsuits and demanding that I make an
Really?
apology to them publicly and through the newspaper.
Really?
And so, whatever. You're not going to respond to that stuff whenever you're threatened with lawsuits. Like, I didn't do anything illegal.
Your
I am-
paper's 100% behind you, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
But-
talk about who told you to put the video on Facebook,
He
on
said-
social media.
He said that Jordan's dad said that he was contacting the FBI. So maybe the FBI will look into what's going on in Webster County. But I don't think that
Well, I
that's
know
something.
Andrew Bailey pretty well, and
that-
he's getting ready
that's-
to be the deputy FBI director. from
That's
Missouri.
what I know about Jordan's parents. What I know about my abuser's parents is my abuser's mother's been abused for their entire marriage. She's like a robot. She brings him his dinner while he watches golf after work. They don't sleep in the same beds. She gets beat up whenever she doesn't do her exact. It's a learned behavior in my experience. And it's something that they never watched the only man they respect in their life accept any accountability for his actions, and they never watched that man enforce
treat
any
his
accountability
wife, yeah.
for their child. They don't raise their children correctly, and then in turn you get a grown man who thinks he can do whatever he wants as long as it's in his own house, or as long as it's behind a building at Disneyland in Anaheim, California, where nobody can see that you're being strangled. As long as no one can see it. I was at a Christmas party one time at one of my friend's house in Seymour, and he grabbed a hold of me because I laughed at a guy's joke, and he grabbed a hold of me and pulled me into the bathroom and held me up against the wall, suffocating my face and choking me. It is just something that, like I said, you can't rationalize it, but none of us can relate to raising our children
Right.
to think that anything like that would be okay. And none of us can imagine witnessing that type of behavior from our parents. So I don't think that anyone could rationalize it if they are in correct moral standing.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
It's really something that,
I'm exhausted just listening to your story.
I'm sorry, the
No,
conversation is
no, it's-
so
it's
helpful
it's
though.
so,
It's
yeah.
helpful for
Good.
all of the victims
Good.
who might
That's why we're doing
see
it.
something that discourages them
Yeah.
from coming forward. That needs to be negated by positive support in the community. And I'm going to say it again. You cannot sit stagnant and be silent and not pick a side, because there is no gray area. If a situation is black and white, why would you want to be even considered to be on the wrong side of history?
Well, and that's why I said it's all about the truth. It's
Yeah.
the truth. It's not opinion. It's not people. It's the truth. And whatever the truth is what, when I went through some stuff as the director of the new medical marijuana program in the state of Missouri, I was slandered. I was libeled. There was all kinds of stuff going out there on the Kansas City Star, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and we may do a story sometime on it. And I came to the conclusion after much prayer and support from the friends, it doesn't really matter. look at social media today.
Yes.
You got half the nation that thinks Donald Trump's the greatest man that ever lived, and you got half that thinks he's the biggest buffoon that ever walked. How can you be that divisive in a community, in a society today? But the bottom line is my conclusion was, it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
As long as the people that you love and that love you believe in you, and as long as God knows the truth and you know the truth, that's all that matters.
Exactly.
People can say and do whatever they want to do. But that doesn't mean that we have to protect each other.
Yes.
And, we have to protect your life, Haley's life. That's what we have to do as a society. And if that means doing this, if that means you telling your story to help protect that next victim, you telling your story as the mother of someone that you love more than life itself, then we have to do it. As a cousin, I mean, I love you, and I love my cousins and my family. And if this can help in any way to make sure the truth is out there and stood up, and that the system can be fixed and remedied if there's a problem, then I'm going to do it every day. So, thank you, Shelby. Thank you so much for telling your story. And I hope people will take this and show it to others and make sure that we all can pull together to make Marshfield the place that we all love, and that we can have a system that we all believe in and that we trust. And you know what? Probably 90% of the time the system does work. And we've got great people that work in the courthouse and in the county and in the city, and it's not that. But we got to make sure that these dire situations, these where people's lives are at stake, that we keep the protection that they have to have, that we keep, we make sure we fix that problem. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I appreciate your support. I've been really lucky to kind of learn from you over the years, and by watching you and respecting you. And
Thank you.
I've always appreciated the way that you care about this community. So I think that this is something that hopefully it touched even one person, whether that be someone who used to be in the club of, well, why would she stay? Maybe it changed their heart. Mm-hmm. Maybe it opened the eyes of a woman who realizes that her husband only lets her live off of $100 a month. Maybe she realizes that's financial abuse. Maybe it has touched someone. At the very least, it encourages people to, one, share your story if you're comfortable doing so, if you're a survivor of anything like this, because you don't know how much it's going to help someone else.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mm-hmm. We'll see y'all soon. Thank you for tuning in. We'll keep you in the loop.